не совсем, понимаете, по-американски говорил. Но
he said he had a story to tell.
Вовчик сказал,
A story he had to tell.
Герман гестапо.
I was in Moscow last June for the Reagan-Gorbachev summit meeting. He was a stocky little bulldog of a man, a Russian who barged into our hotel demanding to see an American reporter. I agreed to meet him in a park.
Maybe.
He arrived wearing old medals and clutching an old shopping bag.
Но я не думал, что мне...
My name, he said, is Dr. Nikita Zakharovich Asayev. I was a dentist in the army in World War II.
Нашим русским людям.
The medal on his right lapel is for being wounded in combat. The scar over his right eye, he said, was a little memory from the Gestapo. We were all prisoners of the Germans, he said, at a big concentration camp on the Oder River. There were 8,000 American soldiers there, captured at Tobruk in North Africa. The camp was laid out this way. The Gestapo barracks was here. The Americans were here. The Russians were here. Each of the Americans received every Friday 5 kilos of food from the Red Cross, but the Germans gave us only 1 liter of turnip soup per day and 1 liter of water. We were dying by the tens and then by the hundreds. The Americans could see this. I was the only dentist in the camp, so I could sometimes talk to the Americans. 2 American brothers, Volchik, Michael Volchik, a sergeant, and his brother Peter, came to me and suggested a plot by which the Americans would smuggle food to us. By what method did the Americans deliver these parcels to the Russians? At night, after the sentry passed, they would throw them over the wire. It was only 8 meters. Those American boys were strong. They could throw them 100 meters. Was it dangerous for the Americans to do what they did? Oh, of course. They would have killed us. They executed people for less. When the plot was discovered, they called all 8,000 Americans out in the hot sun, and 4 Gestapo men went down the line demanding to know the name of the Russian who organized the plot. For 3 hours, they stood there. They stood in absolute silence. Not one American betrayed me. Now, because of you guys, if they're alive, they'll know I remember. This dentist whom they loved and whom they did not betray. He took an oath, Dr. Asayev said, that after the war he would find a way to thank those Americans. What good men they were, he said. He gave us a list of the names he remembered. When we returned to the United States, we found some of the people on that list. Dr. Sidney Brockman is retired from his job at the health department in San Antonio, Texas. We asked him about his relationship with Dr. Asayev in the prison camp.
It was a very close relationship. We all had a tremendous respect for the man because we knew that the Russian prisoners were having things mighty rough.
William Jarima is a retired New York City police detective living now in Ontario. He helped smuggle the food.
It was a terrific operation. Terrific.
They threw a few cigarettes to the guard. The guard walked one way while you were bribing the other way.
Angelo Spinelli was in that camp. Incredibly, he smuggled in a camera and took pictures there.
Put on a German uniform.
This picture is of the Russian prisoners turned out for roll call.
They were all starving. All of them were starving.
When the Russian prisoners would die in their barracks, their comrades would not report their death to the Germans. They would bring them out and stand them up for roll call so that their bodies would be counted in the count for rations.
One of the pictures Spinelli made was of a Russian prisoner who tried to pick up a cigarette Americans had thrown to him and was shot to death by a guard. In such a deadly place as Stalag 3B, why did the Americans take dangerous chances night after night to smuggle food to Dr. Asayev? The question, asked all these years later, released a flow of memory and emotion.
He was an ally, so naturally we wanted to help him and the other Russians.
We actually were repaid many times by having that feeling of self-satisfaction, knowing that you helped someone who was in need. And it's too bad we don't have more of that in the world today.
On that park bench in Moscow, an old soldier opened a package of memoirs. Oh, these are my darlings, he said. These are my treasures. Among his treasures was a metal cigarette case inscribed from the American Dr. Brockman to the Russian Dr. Asayev. He didn't have anything else to give me. A prisoner is a prisoner. In faraway San Antonio, Texas, Dr. Sidney Brockman found something he too has kept all these years.
It was given to me by Dr. Asayev. It is a cigarette box, and inside this little plaque which says Sidney Brockman from N.S. Asayev. I have not believed in being a professional prisoner. It's over. It's done with. I want to forget it if I can. But I can't.
Can you please ring for me a number in Moscow?
After 43 years, two old comrades in arms were united by telephone.
Yeah, William Yarema. I had written to him shortly after the war in 45 when I got home, and my letter came back. So I had assumed that he had perished.
William!
Yeah.
William!
Yeah, huh?
William, Dr. Asayev said. William, write to me. Write to me, he said, and I will respond to you with all my heart.
Yeah, that's right. It's a different type of weeping. It's actually it's one of joy and happiness. I thought he had been dead.
Last month, William Jarema went to the Soviet Union to find an old friend, and found him.
There he is.
And Dr. Asayev's vow that someday he would find a way to say thank you to those Americans, his promise to himself of 43 years ago, was finally kept.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
I saw him last in 1945 in Luckenwald.
It's so nice to see you. I should say, было очень приятно.
Ни один американец никогда не сказал, что это вот русский, понимаете?
According to him, my group say that several hundreds of Russians.
6,5 тонн, 1350 пакетов.
There are only actually about 8 of us that did the operation. We're supplying food to them. And the less that knew about it, the better off we were, because
It all happened a long time ago. They were young men thrown together by circumstance, a Russian army dentist, and a handful of American GIs who risked their lives to save his. He wanted them to know he remembers.
Сувенир.
They remember, too.
Бракман from.
yeah.
I appreciate his remembering me. I have never forgotten him. I will never forget him. What more can I say?